Imagine saving up $10,000 for your dream watch. You've been thinking about it for months, maybe years. You walk into the boutique, you put it on your wrist, you hand over the money, and within 6 months, you want something else. That is the single most expensive mistake in watch collecting, and it happens constantly, but it is completely avoidable if you own these 7 watches first. This is not a starter collection list. This is a curriculum. Every watch on this list teaches you something specific about what you like, what you need, and what actually matters on your wrist. And by the time you finish this education, the $10,000 watch you choose will be a completely different and better pick than the one you would buy today. Not because your taste gets more expensive, because your taste gets more yours. Number 1. The Casio G-Shock at around $100. Your first watch lesson has nothing to do with Swiss movements or sapphire crystals. It has to do with getting punched in the face by reality. The G-Shock exists to teach you that function and raw durability matter more than price. This is a watch you can wear while doing demolition work, take into the ocean, slam against a door frame, and it just keeps running. 200 meters of water resistance, shock-resistant module, and a resin case that will outlast watches costing 50 times more. Why does this matter before spending $10,000? Because it recalibrates your brain. You stop associating price with capability. You learn that a watch does not need to be expensive to be genuinely good at its job. And that is a filter you need installed before you enter a luxury boutique, because plenty of expensive watches are less functional than this $100 Casio on your wrist. Plenty of $3,000 dress watches cannot survive a weekend camping trip that this G-Shock would handle without a scratch. Therefore, once you understand that durability and function are baseline expectations and not luxury features, you are ready for the next lesson. Number 2. The Seiko 5 or Seiko Prospex diver at around $250 to $350. This is where you fall in love with mechanical watchmaking for the first time. Flip over a Seiko 5 with an exhibition caseback and watch the rotor spin as you move your wrist. That tiny mechanical engine, running on nothing but motion, changes how you think about watches forever. You stop seeing them as accessories and start seeing them as machines. If you go the Prospex route, you also get your introduction to the dive watch category. A proper ISO-rated diver with a unidirectional bezel, screw-down crown, and lume you can actually read underwater. All for the price of a decent dinner out. Seiko has been building dive watches since the 1960s. And the finishing you get at this price point, the sunburst dials, the applied indices, is honestly hard to believe once you hold one in person. The mechanical movement teaches appreciation. The dive spec teaches functionality. Both of those lessons will save you thousands later, because you will know whether mechanical movements genuinely excite you or whether you actually prefer quartz reliability. That distinction alone is worth the $300 investment. And if you discover you are not a dive watch person at $300, you just saved yourself from buying a Submariner you would have regretted. Number 3. The Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical at around $625 to $695. Now you are going to learn 3 things at once. First, what hand winding feels like. The Hamilton H50 caliber is a hand-wound movement with an 80-hour power reserve, meaning you physically wind this watch yourself every few days. Some people find this ritual deeply satisfying. Others find it annoying. You need to know which camp you fall into before you spend $10,000 on a manually wound piece. Second, military heritage. Hamilton has been making field watches since they supplied American troops in the early 20th century. The Khaki Field Mechanical is a direct descendant of those original soldiers' watches from the 1960s. The matte blasted case, the clean Arabic numeral dial with no date window, the NATO strap that feels like it belongs in the field. Wearing it teaches you whether heritage and provenance actually matter to you, or whether you just like the idea of them. Third, and this one catches people off guard, what 38mm actually looks like on your wrist. At 9.5mm thick, with a 47mm lug-to-lug measurement, this watch sits compact and flat. If you have been eyeing oversized 42 and 44mm pieces, the Hamilton teaches you that smaller watches often wear better. They slip under shirt cuffs. They feel like they belong on your arm instead of sitting on top of it. And that lesson alone prevents a lot of regret at the $10,000 level. Because the trend in luxury watchmaking right now is moving back towards smaller, thinner cases. Number 4. The Tissot PRX Powermatic 80 at around $750. This is where finishing starts to matter. Pick up a PRX and run your thumb across the integrated bracelet. Feel the transitions between brushed and polished surfaces. Notice how the links flow directly into the case without any gap or adapter. That integrated bracelet design, which has its roots in a 1978 Tissot C-Star, teaches you what premium construction feels like in your hand before you experience it at 3 or 4 times the price. Inside, the Powermatic 80 movement delivers an 80-hour reserve with a Nivacron anti-magnetic hairspring, sapphire crystal on the front and caseback, 100 meters of water resistance. At under $800, Tissot is showing you what legitimate Swiss finishing and engineering look like without the luxury markup. Therefore, when you eventually handle a Royal Oak or a Nautilus, you will have a reference point. You will know exactly how much better the finishing actually is versus how much of that price tag is just brand premium. And for a lot of people, that comparison is genuinely humbling, because the gap is not always as wide as the price difference suggests. If you are finding this breakdown useful so far, hit subscribe. We cover watches at every price tier here every week. Number 5. The Seiko Presage, or a Grand Seiko entry piece, ranging from around $450 up to $3,000. If you buy nothing else on this list, buy this lesson, because this is where you learn what world-class dial finishing actually looks like. A Seiko Presage cocktail time dial uses techniques borrowed from traditional Japanese lacquer work and enamel craft. The textures catch light in ways that photographs cannot capture. You have to see it in person to understand. Tilt a Presage under a desk lamp and the dial shifts through 3 or 4 different colors depending on the angle. No flat printed dial at this price point comes close. But if you stretch toward a Grand Seiko, even at the entry level around the $2,000 to $3,000 mark, you encounter Zaratsu polishing. This is a technique that produces perfectly distortion-free mirror surfaces on the case, where every flat plane reflects light like still water, and every edge is so sharp it could almost cut paper. Grand Seiko's dial work and case finishing regularly embarrass watches that cost 5 and 10 times more. This teaches you that finishing quality and price are not always correlated, and that is a critical lesson before you go spending $10,000. Number 6. The Tudor Black Bay 58 at around $3,700 to $4,500. This is where you cross into genuine luxury territory. Tudor's manufacture MT5402 caliber, now with COSC and METAS Master Chronometer certification, sits inside a 39mm case that wears like a vintage Submariner from the 1950s. The finishing steps up noticeably from the previous price tiers. The bezel click is tighter, the bracelet drapes differently. The winding action feels more precise. However, the real lesson is subtler than specs. Wearing a Tudor daily teaches you what actual quality feels like over weeks and months, not just during a 5-minute try-on at the counter. You learn how a properly engineered bracelet clasp functions, how a well-regulated movement holds time day after day, and how a competently designed case wears through an entire season without looking scratched to pieces. This is the difference between reading about quality online and actually living with it. And you need that lived experience before writing a 5-figure check. There is also a secondary lesson here about brand positioning. Tudor is owned by the same family as Rolex. They share manufacturing facilities and quality standards, but the Tudor sits at roughly 1/3 of the Rolex price. Wearing one forces you to ask an honest question about whether the Rolex premium is worth it to you personally, or whether Tudor already gives you 90% of the experience. Number 7. The Omega Seamaster or Speedmaster at around $6,000 to $7,500. This is the final exam. The Omega is not just a watch, it is a category test. The Seamaster teaches you whether you are a dive watch person at a legitimate luxury level. The Speedmaster teaches you whether you are a chronograph person with real heritage behind it. And the Coaxial Master chronometer movement inside is a genuine technical achievement, with magnetic resistance up to 15,000 Gauss and a free-sprung balance that makes the movement architecture meaningfully different from anything you have worn so far. You are also buying heritage and storytelling at a level that matters. The Speedmaster went to the moon. The Seamaster has been on the wrist of James Bond since 1995. Whether that narrative adds value for you, or whether you would rather spend the same money on pure finishing and engineering, that is a deeply personal question, and you cannot answer it honestly until you have actually owned the watch. You need time on the wrist to separate what you genuinely value from what marketing has told you to value. That separation is the entire point of this list. So look at what just happened. You started at $100 learning about durability. You moved through mechanical appreciation, hand-winding rituals, military heritage, integrated bracelet design, dial finishing at a world-class level, in-house luxury construction, and finally, heritage tier watchmaking. Every single one of those experiences changed your taste in ways you could not have predicted. The $10,000 watch you would choose right now, today, without this education. It is probably wrong. It is probably based on someone else's opinion, or an Instagram photo, or whatever the forums are currently hyping. But the $10,000 watch you choose after living with these 7 pieces, that watch is yours. It reflects what you actually value, not what you think you should value, and you will keep it forever. That is the real path to a grail. Not saving up blindly and hoping for the best, but building the knowledge first so the money goes exactly where it should. The 7 watches on this list cost roughly $12,000 combined. That sounds like a lot until you realize the alternative is one $10,000 mistake sitting in a drawer collecting dust while you browse the forums looking for what you should have bought in the first place. If you are on that path right now, hit subscribe. We cover watches at every price point here every single week. And if you want to see what comes after the $10,000 mark, that video is right here.